Florida attacks. A gator takes on a python and wins. Marlisa, this video is going viral.
It began with a feeling, a low, persistent hum that you felt in your bones. Residents reported strange things. A vibration in a swimming pool with the pump turned off. The ground itself feeling unstable. Then, the animals changed. In the canals of Florida, the alligators stopped moving. They would hang motionless for hours, ancient eyes just above the water, staring at nothing. This wasn't the behavior of a predator at rest. This was the stillness of something listening. An experiment was underway, an elegant solution to a difficult problem. An invisible fence built from sound. It was designed to be a simple deterrent, a way to keep the peace. But a terrible mistake had been made. They thought they were telling the animals to stay away. They were actually broadcasting a challenge, a constant, unending declaration of war. And the alligators were not retreating. They were preparing for battle. Florida is a state of engineered proximity. The canals, the retention ponds, the manicured greens, they are all intrusions into the ancient territory of the American alligator. This cohabitation has always been managed by a simple, brutal equation. When the risk becomes too high, the animal is removed. But in an era of heightened environmental consciousness, the lethal removal program became a public relations liability. The state needed a buffer, a way to manage the risk without the visible, final act of a trapper's snare. They needed a solution that was both effective and morally clean. The answer, they believed, lay in the realm of the unperceived. A non-lethal, non-invasive deterrent that could redraw the boundaries of the wild without a single physical barrier. The logic was flawless.
A fisherman in the Northern Territory says he's happy to be alive after being shaken awake by a monster croc while sleeping in his boat.
If you make a space undesirable, the animal will choose to leave. It was a triumph of human overconfidence in a purely technical fix. The chosen tool was sound, specifically low-frequency sound, an invisible electronic fence that promised to keep the peace. Low-frequency sound is the foundation of the crocodilian world. It is the language of their bellow, the seismic signature of their size and dominance. It travels through water and earth, bypassing the air to become a physical declaration. Below 20 Hz, the frequency is not heard. It is felt, a deep internal vibration that signals presence and power. For the alligator, this is the core of their communication. Their bellows, the territorial calls that ripple the water's surface, are rich in these very low frequencies. It is how they communicate size, status, and threat. The experiment, Project Hum, was deployed in 3 distinct residential zones. The system was an array of specialized underwater transducers, or speakers, placed along the edges of the waterways. The frequency was carefully calibrated to mimic the lower end of an alligator's territorial bellow, but at a constant, low-level pulse. The objective was not to cause pain, but to create a perpetual, non-specific irritation, a sonic barrier that would make the area feel permanently occupied, perpetually hostile. The system was designed to be a constant electronic presence, an invisible rival that never slept. The sound was a low electronic drone, a mechanical imitation of a threat that was always there but never materialized. The technology was precise. The deployment was textbook. The system was, by all technical metrics, a success. The sound was emitted exactly as programmed. The initial data was a lie. Alligator sightings dropped, but the animals had not retreated. They had simply submerged, moving their activity below the surface into the water column where the sound was most intense. They were not deterred. They were adapting to the pressure. The movement patterns became pathologically focused. The alligators were spending less time basking and more time submerged, their bodies absorbing the constant low-grade vibration. They began to patrol the perimeter of the sound field with a new, relentless intensity. The first true sign of the shift was the change in their territorial response. The animals began to challenge each other with a desperate, heightened ferocity. Fights were no longer ritualized displays. They were immediate, brutal confrontations. The aggression was not directed at the sound, but at everything else that moved. They were quicker to snap, slower to retreat. They were not scared away. They were pushed into a state of permanent, sensitized vigilance. The system was technically working. The sound was being emitted precisely as programmed. No alarms went off. No component failed. The failure was not in the hardware, but in the profound misreading of the animal's instinct. The subtle escalation was the most terrifying part. It was not chaos. It was a slow, quiet tightening of the tension in the environment. The animals were not broken. They were simply more dangerous, locked in a silent electronic war. The shift manifested in specific, documented incidents that defied all prior behavioral models. In the third month, a resident in Zone B reported an encounter that defied standard alligator behavior. A large male didn't just hiss or retreat when a homeowner stepped onto their wooden dock. It launched a sustained, rhythmic strike against the pilings. It wasn't hunting. It was trying to dismantle the structure, as if the dock itself had become a territorial rival. The animal remained there for 3 days, refusing to eat, simply striking the wood until its snout was raw. This was not a feeding response. It was a combat response directed at a stationary object. Later, researchers began to document what they termed escort behavior. Alligators were no longer just sitting in the water. They were following boats and kayaks at a fixed distance of 10 feet, mirroring every turn. They weren't looking for a handout. They were herding the intruders out of the sound field with a silent, predatory focus that felt more like a military patrol than a wild animal's instinct. The animals were no longer reacting to a threat. They were proactively enforcing a boundary that they perceived as constantly being violated. The data showed a clear pattern. The alligators were not avoiding the sound. They were defending against it. They were in a state of permanent combat readiness, and every movement, every shadow, every vibration became a potential target for their displaced aggression. The initial theory of chronic stress was too simple. The deeper analysis suggested a catastrophic misinterpretation of the alligator's communication structure. The sound frequency was not a neutral irritant. It was a constant, non-stop declaration of dominance. When a male alligator bellows, it is a finite challenge. I am here. This is mine. The challenge is answered, or it is ignored. The world returns to silence. But the electronic hum was a phantom rival, a bellow that never ended, a constant, non-specific challenge that could not be located, could not be fought, and could not be silenced. It was a perpetual state of war without an enemy. The sound was not driving them away. It was telling them perpetually that their territory was under constant, invisible siege. It was amplifying their deepest instinct to defend, to challenge, to patrol. The animals were driven to a psychological breaking point, forced to live in a world where the threat was constant and unidentifiable. We had assumed that removing fear would lead to calm. We were wrong. We had simply replaced the natural rhythmic threat of the wild with a permanent electronic state of high alert. The interference didn't deter them, it weaponized them. The experiment was terminated after 6 months. The data was collected, the reports were filed, and the project was quietly shelved. The conclusion was clear. The unintended consequence was a psychological and behavioral shift that the original problem never presented. It raises a fundamental question about our relationship with the natural world. What happens when we attempt to control an ancient, complex instinct with a single, elegant technological solution? We seek to manage the wild, but we forget that non-lethal interference can still be profoundly destructive. The sound stopped. The electronic hum was gone. The phantom rival was finally silenced. The canals returned to their natural silence, but the behavior, the heightened territoriality, the unpredictable aggression, the constant state of vigilance. That did not.